Hi everybody, this is a screencast reviewing everything we did in week 4 in WebD 170 JavaScript. So if you didn't happen to make the class, this is sort of coverage for it, and I'll zip all the files. So we were doing events and functions, and the whole point of this is that events drive functions. One of the most important themes taught that day was that when you don't know how to start with a project, think of the event that the user will complete on the browser to get the action going. So really, when you start doing this, a lot of times you're just going to be writing out an event on an element in a web page and then writing a function that completes that functionality that the user drives, that the user wants to occur. So I'm going to first open up this events.html, and what you're looking at is very confusing if you didn't see it in class. It's probably confusing if you were in class. But basically, I am running a couple of events here. We started by having a button with the value of click me, and then this right here is the event. We're saying on click, let's call this block of code. So I'm running the function, and I'm passing an event to that function. So what is event? Well, let's just take a look. It's one of those things you sort of just have to see. So I'm saving my section here, and I'm going to refresh, and when I go to my developer tools, there they are, I can do click me, and this is the event that came in. It has everything that all the information about the thing that was clicked. In fact, if I go to target, I can see specifically things about that target, like the ID. Right now there is no ID, but let's say I added an ID to that, like ID equals some button, like that. If I hit yes and upload and hit refresh again and do click me, we will see that the target, which is right here, has an input of some button. And if I go to my ID, right here you see some button. So we get all sorts of things about the event. Where they clicked on the screen, 56,113, which is true. 56x and y is 113. We have offsets, which is actually the 8 by 37 x and y that's above. We've got all sorts of information, but it's really about a user-driven event. So the next event that we learned was body onload. Now, this only occurs when the closing body tag runs. So what did we create? Well, we created a preloader. We put a lot of content in here. We're going to do empty cache hard reload. And once we do this, you see waiting for cache. Let's see. There's the GIF right there, and it took a few seconds, but what happens is once the closing body tag loads, we take our loader and make the style property of that loader and the display value equal to none. So this is how JavaScript controls CSS. And the book, which is the ID that contains all the content, well, that's now fully loaded, and I can make that a display of block. Above the script, we made the opposite. We made sure the content was display none and the loading GIF was display block. So that's a preloader. Anyway, so we did a lot of different events, and this was the first script. We did on click and on load here. So let's go to, let me close down my other stuff here, and we'll go to the next script. So we wanted to learn something more about onload. So in this case, this was onload detect device, and when we did that, we actually detected whether you were using Android or if you were using iPhone. And this is because we were looking for handy functions that are very common for when the body onload event is used. There's also a window onload too, by the way, but the body onload generally is code-based, which is why I enjoy it. I like it for what we're trying to do. And this was a case of just saying, okay, the navigator.app version index of Android does not equal -1. That means there's an Android inside the navigator property app version. So like right now, if I go to this in a browser, device detection, we see the Navigator object logged, and app version is this: Macintosh, Intel, what version of Mac OS I'm using, and the Chrome browser. Anyway, that was just one more example of events. We also did an on-key down event, which was quite fun, and I'll go ahead and show you what this did. And if you're in class, it's hard to remember this stuff as well. So what I'm doing is taking on key. You see how I'm doing on key press or on key down? And what's happening is it's missing that first digit. Okay, so I'm missing that first digit always. So basically what we're doing is on key press show text, but we started with on key down, and once we switched on key up, it worked fine. So as far as the code's concerned, we're just getting this ID and populating it with values from show letters. So this is your input type, and we'll throw it up here, and this will work now because it's on key up, which is what it should do. So now you should see that the letters all match the top. Okay, so that is on the difference between on key up and on key down. So watch what happens when I do on key down again, just so I can drill home I'm sorry, I'm doing command on key down equals show text. There we go. Now I'll save it and put it up. Again, on key down is not the one we want. Watch what happens. 1, oh, nothing shows up. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're 1 behind. So always use on key up for applications like Google Suggest. All right, then we went on to dive into functions. So at this point we have a script called arguments, which I'll go over, and arguments is kind of fun because it's going to be very similar to any other language you've ever seen. So like for us, I'm going to go ahead and alert. So let's take our first one, okay? We're calling this function argument demo and passing Chris to some name and passing John to student. So watch what happens. Once I hit save and upload, now we can do this, and you see Chris and John. But if I didn't pass that argument, let's say I didn't pass a second argument, we would have Wes. And refresh, and we have Wes. And that's because we have a placeholder here. This is going to be common in most of the languages taught in this program, specifically PHP. Then we have show something stuff, because I don't even know where I called it. Let me do show something. There it is. Button on click, pass argument, show something. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to click OK, and we're going to pass that argument, and you see what I passed? Show something this. And this is the argument that came in. So watch again. Okay, I got show something, and I use the keyword this. Now show something has stuff, and console.log has stuff, and that's the actual element itself. Stuff is this. So we also started focusing on dynamic validation for form fields, and we learned the onBlur event. Now onBlur occurs when the user's cursor leaves a specific element. So watch, if I'm entering my email here and I blur, it says you need to add a dot to your email. Notice how the response is right next to the value. Also take a look at the cursor. If I start adding something like this and do onBlur, we're good. Now watch, if I do onBlur, I just tabbed out, the cursor stays in there. Well, let's show why that happened. I have an input type email, ID email, and onBlur validate me, and I'm passing this. So text field stuff is this. And when we log the ID and the text value, what do we get? Well, let's go back. Email and you entered. Well, let's do this. onBlur, email, and you entered WEDWD. Add a dot, onBlur, you need to add an @ symbol. Add an @ symbol, and now we're good. So basically, once we have this, if text field stuff.value equals empty, then we know we need to add the email, which is why we're making our inner HTML equal to that. We remove anything that was in there, which is obviously empty right now, which I'll take out because that's redundant. And then we use the focus function to put the cursor back into the text field. Repeat, focus puts the cursor back into the input type. Pretty good user experience here. Now this part is excellent. If the value of the text field, if its index of @ is equal to -1, that means it doesn't have an @ symbol. Now we can be very specific. You need to add an @ symbol to your email address, and then we can focus. The same if there's no dot, because every email needs a dot. So on blur is the point of this. That's when the cursor loses focus on the text field, and the focus means the cursor's in the text field. All right, so one more to go. I've got a form right here, and this is a little function about credit cards. It's actually for the loan check, which we'll go into at another point. I am going to put this is a checkout form, and I'm going to put this in the zip file for this screencast, but it's not really in use until you get knowledge of what the loan check is. So it's just a base level concept of how to validate a form. So we start with valid as false, and sometimes we can do true as well. So we'll be revisiting this next week. So that was week 4 for WebD 170.